And good evening, YouTube land. Dr. Abe here. I want to talk to you the next few minutes about an issue that I think is of paramount importance. And it may seem minor compared to all of the craziness that's going on in the world as we speak, but this is something that I've heard bandied about in public discourse for quite a while now, and that's the idea of churches paying taxes. As you know, churches are exempt from paying most taxes. They're classified as 503c(b) or 503b nonprofit corporations, and so they're not required to pay taxes. Also, because of the separation of church and state as mandated in the Constitution, that also falls under that. And so churches are also exempt from paying taxes for those reasons. But there's a more practical reason that I'm not sure people really know about. I think many people who haven't grown up in the church and haven't spent a lot of time around it sort of visualize churches as Joel Osteen, the pastor being a CEO, stadiums full of thousands of people. And I think that also has to do with the televangelists of the 70s and 80s and their huge, sanctuaries and buildings and bringing in millions of dollars on TV and that sort of thing. And that really isn't what the average church in America is like at all. In fact, according to the Hartford Institute for Religion Research, 7 out of 10 churches in the United States have fewer than 100 weekly attendees. And so they're very small. In fact, the average of that 70% of U.S. churches, the average weekly attendance for that 70% is 60 attendees or fewer weekly. And so not only that, but they're also entirely dependent upon the giving of those attendees to stay open, to meet their expenses, to pay for repairs to the property, to pay for the salary expenses of their staff, any other expenses that may come up. Some churches, if they're denominationally affiliated, they have financial obligations to the denomination that they have to meet. Some have to meet certain financial requirements as far as missions giving and those sorts of things. And more importantly, many churches also provide valuable services to their community. For example, my local church here in Southeast Missouri provides a food bank to the community. It's a once a week thing that we operate, and it's a vital service that many people in our community here depend upon. And churches offer other types of ministry. Some churches provide counseling services to the community if they have someone on staff who's a clinical counselor, for example, and the list goes on and on. And here's the thing. If churches were required to pay taxes, most churches would close because they wouldn't be able to keep their doors open. They wouldn't be able to pay a staff. They wouldn't be able to pay for upgrades for their building, which have to be brought up to code in most instances. And so the money that would normally go for those purposes would have to be shifted to paying taxes. Another idea that I don't think people understand is just how drastically the cost of insuring a church building has just skyrocketed in recent years. Not only the church building, but also some churches have a parsonage, and they also housing for their pastor, and they also carry insurance responsibilities with that. And so it's just an astronomical cost as far as insurance is concerned. I was reading an article not too long ago. It was from last year, the middle of 2024, from the Religion News Service, and it profiled a church in Florida that was paying $23,000 a year for their overall premium, their insurance premium on their building. Within just a certain couple of months' time, they were dropped from their insurance, even though they never filed any claims, and they had to find a new insurance provider, and then they were charged an $80,000 a year insurance premium. So It almost quadrupled over what they were paying in the previous year. Most churches are not in a position to be able to absorb that, much less pay taxes on top of that. So I think it's an important thing to realize just how important churches are to the life of local communities, even if they don't have a lot of people attending, and even if they don't have big fancy buildings. Churches are often the lifeblood of small towns and even of suburban areas. And so if they were forced to pay taxes, most churches would have to close. That's just the cold, hard truth of the matter. And I'll leave you with that.